So the president is coming home to sky-high gas prices and record-breaking inflation hitting American wallets all across the country. Let's bring in our political panel. Former Special Assistant to President Trump and the America First Policy Institute's Chief Communications Director and former Obama campaign communications advisor, Patriots of Two Nations author and Boots Road Group managing partner Spencer Critchley, and of course Marc Lotter. Failed to mention his name off the top. Thank you both for joining us. We've got a lot to get to. Let's start with the president coming home to inflation not getting any better. Americans are feeling it everywhere. Speaker Pelosi actually not too long ago said inflation she feels has peaked or is peaking. The White House says the CPI numbers are off, not quite right. Some people are calling this a spin. Here's Representative Alyssa Slotkin. Listen to her, and then we'll have you react on the other side.
And I think people can feel and see spin, and I don't think they like it. And I think what we need to be saying is, look, we know that salaries, increases in people's pay is not keeping up with inflation.
So, Spencer, I'll go to you first. Do you think this administration could do a better job of owning what's happening in this country?
I think that the Democrats often struggle with being good at policy and not so good at politics. And this has been a growing problem that I identify as going back at least to the 1960s, is the party's become increasingly well educated overall, which tends to lead towards smarter policy, as I think the record has shown, but it tends not necessarily to lead to good politics. And I'm not sure anybody actually could do a good job of owning inflation numbers like this. They're just tough politically, even though if you look at it as policy, of the 44 advanced economies around the world, 37 of them are struggling with dramatically higher inflation, and the United States ranks number 13 on that list. So you can't blame all of this on President Biden from a policy point of view. In fact, he has very little control over it, just like President Trump had very little control over inflation.
The White House, I will say, does bring that up quite often in the daily briefings. Mark, the Democrats also bring up abortion quite a bit, especially in the last couple of weeks on the Hill. They are going all in on abortion, making the case really that the choice is between a nationwide abortion ban or put in Democrats and will codify Roe v. Wade. Do you think that is going to work as Americans are really struggling just to buy basic goods at the grocery store?
Yeah, no, it won't work. And it's absolutely clear that the Democrats would love to do anything to change the subject away from inflation. But issue number 1, 2, and 3 to the American people are inflation, the economy, gas prices. All of these things land at the feet of Joe Biden. And the problem is, to the earlier point, is that Democrats don't have any good answers to it, because the only two things in their toolkit are to either blame someone else or to spend more money. And spending more money is what got us into this problem in the first place. And so they really don't have any answers for it. The American people want answers, and so they're just trying to change the subject, and it's not going to work.
Spencer, I'm going to have you respond to that, but I want you to respond in the context of this really interesting shift that we're seeing among voters. Axios was looking at the New York Times poll, New York Times Siena poll just released a couple of days ago, and they wrote this: Democrats are becoming the party of upscale voters concerned about issues like gun control and abortion rights, while Republicans are quietly building a multiracial coalition of working-class voters with inflation as an accelerant. Spencer, what do you see happening here?
I think that there are big problems for both parties, and frankly, I think the overriding problem is the problem facing the country, and this is essentially what I go into in detail in my book, if you don't mind me mentioning it. We have a very serious division in this country that's not left versus right in traditional terms. In fact, the traditional left versus right division, essentially over the size of the government in liberal democracy, is almost irrelevant compared to what we're facing now. We're really facing a deep, deep fight over the definition of what this country is. Getting back to the politics, I think the number one issue in our politics, therefore, has to be, what is our conception of what America is, and do we want to defend the democracy we've had so far? As far as economic performance goes, this is an example of how Democrats have become stuck in their heads, in my view, and have tended to become alienated from ordinary working Americans in many cases because of that. And one example is they do a very bad job of selling the fact that economic performance under Democratic presidents has always been better, and yet you cannot convince many people of that. They're convinced the Republicans are better. But across a broad spectrum, economic growth unemployment, inflation, it's better under Democrats. Now, it's tough now, but there's no simple answer to that, much as we want one. And as I say, it's not caused by Biden's spending. That has a marginal effect on our inflation rate.
Can I
this
ask,
is
Spencer,
sweeping the advanced world, this inflation.
Yeah. Can I ask, though, what can Democrats do to win back voters like your younger voters, your Hispanic voters? They are losing ground when it comes to Hispanic voters especially. What can Democrats do better?
Yeah, and I've talked on my podcast about this with my good friend Mike Madrid, who's a career-long Republican consultant specializing in Latino voting. I think that's a big warning call for Democrats. A warning call to Republicans is that their extremism on abortion and on guns and on, frankly, the attempted overthrow of democracy is scaring away college-educated white voters and suburban voters who Democrats used to be weaker on. I think both parties, as I say, have a very serious issue here, and fundamentally, it's a fight over what the nature of this country is, and we need to address that first of all.
Mark, you've got this January 6th primetime hearing coming up next week. I have to ask you, how much do these hearings hurt the former president, and do you think that he announces a run for the White House before the midterms?
Well, I don't see it having much of an effect right now. Most of the American people aren't, it's not registering with them. It's not coming up as some of the top issues that are facing them in the midterms. And what the president or the former president will do between now and November, obviously, the one thing I can tell you is that they're going to be talking about America First policies. And it's one of the reasons why Democrats are bleeding voters so quickly is because it's not about politics, it's about reality. Just look at reality. People were better off. America was safer. It was stronger. People had more money in their paychecks. Gas was cheap under President Trump and America First leadership. And later this month, in about a week and a half, the president will be coming to Washington, D.C., to the America First Policy Institute Summit to outline the vision moving forward for 2022 and beyond. And it'll be about getting back to those America First policies that worked. And I think that's where we're going to win back a lot of those voters because they can see it. Democrat policies are failing at every single level in every single issue.
So you're saying that you don't know when the former president is going to announce?
I don't, and he'll make that decision, but I can tell you one thing, whoever announces and whoever wins the nomination will be running on America First policies.
All right. Thanks so much to you both. We appreciate it. Come back soon. Griff?
Hey everyone, I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.